Okay, I'm hoping you watch the Khan Academy podcast since I'm going to go fast. I need to get to Turner and the slave ship. I've mentioned that Romanticism was less fascinated by the classical world and all its philosophy, and more fascinated with the medieval world and its religion and mysticism. When the medieval complex that had housed Parliament burned down in 1834, leaving only the medieval Westminster Hall, the British government held a contest to design a replacement. Their requirement, the design had to be based on either Elizabethan or Gothic architectural styles. Either one would have been perceived as a return to the good old days, when true craftsmanship prevailed before industrial, ready-made, mass-produced goods flooded the market. Charles Barry and A.W.N. Pugin won the contest to design a replacement. Pugin, by the way, was a devout convert to Catholicism, one reason why he loved Gothic architecture, associated with an age before the Reformation split the church. Another interesting detail that your reading left out is the Gothic revival was associated with a conservative Victorian reaction against liberalism, which many thought had ignited the bloody revolution in France and the subsequent Napoleonic Wars. But in truth, there are a lot of neoclassical elements in this design. Take out the tracery and the spiral towers, and this could be a Renaissance palace. Note its rhythmic symmetry in particular. The Houses of Parliament also included some very modern elements, including towers that were really designed to ventilate the building, not to soar toward the heavens, and metalwork in the roofs to reduce the risk of fire. So here's the one important portion of the Palace of Westminster that survived the 1834 fire, the Hall of Westminster, built by the son of William the Conqueror in 1097. Westminster was the primary residence of the kings of England until a fire destroyed much of that complex in 1512. After that, it served as the home of the Parliament of England, which had been meeting there since the 13th century, and also as the seat of the Royal Courts of Justice. Let's watch a brief introductory video made by the UK Parliament. This is one of your required images, but I'm guessing it's included mostly to showcase how Barry and Pugin used it as a model for Parliament's interior. And here we see the old and the new compared. The central lobby is the heart of the Houses of Parliament, the place where corridors from the Lords, Commons, and Westminster Hall all meet. The College Board image doesn't really capture the ceiling, which is quite different, so let's watch a very brief clip, also from the UK Parliament. And finally, we come to my favorite Romantic painter, maybe my number 2 artist crush after Caravaggio. Like paintings we've seen by Géricault and Delacroix, this captured a dramatic current event. Any guess what the event was? Look closely. The burning of the Houses of Parliament, painted pretty much right after it happened. Turner was actually an eyewitness, and he based his painting on sketches he made as he watched the buildings burn. I've juxtaposed this painting with our required work, so imagine this is an attribution essay question. Why is burning the Houses of Parliament pretty clearly a work by Turner? How are they similar? In both paintings, we see the play of light on water, inspired partly by repeated trips he'd made to Venice, the city of light on water. We also see the human figures crowded into the foreground, overwhelmed by the forces of nature and disaster, that is, by the sublime. Those fierce, saturated yellows, no dullness here, juxtaposed with blue, are also characteristic of Turner's work. I'll talk more about his use of color in a moment. But these bursts, critics said blobs of pure color, were something new, a foretaste of the art that would burst upon Europe in another 40 years with the Impressionists. We will linger, I hope, on the slave ship. Next to the raft of Medusa, this work generated the most past AP questions from this unit, and this work is still on the list, so heads up, okay? But first, let's look quickly at the development of this remarkable artist. Turner achieved great early success as a landscape painter, rather in the Romantic tradition of Constable. But Turner's vision of the British countryside was often much less sentimental than Constable's, perhaps partly because he personally came from a much poorer background. His work also foreshadowed developments that would not emerge until later in the 19th century with realists such as Courbet. We're getting there. This painting captured the poverty that gripped the English countryside in the hard early years of the Industrial Revolution. Here's a painting that suggests Turner's fascination with horror, again another romantic element. Like Goya, Turner painted his own nightmares, in this case probably enhanced by opium he took to treat a lingering and painful illness. Turner's Field of Waterloo, the site of England's great triumph over Napoleon, also looks more like a work by Goya than a British romantic. It's all about carnage and death and loss. The painting was deeply unpopular at the time. Critics considered it unpatriotic. So I mentioned Goethe, probably the most important literary figure of Romanticism. Goethe had a color theory. The plus colors of yellow and red-yellow excite lively feelings, he thought, while blues imparted gloomy and melancholy emotions, or the impression of cold, as he put it. To Goethe, whose writings Turner closely studied, yellow was above all associated with the sun and with energy-giving qualities. Goethe also anticipated color theorists by observing that every decided color does a certain violence to the eye and forces to its opposition. In plain English, complementary colors catch our eyes and combine optically. Note that Turner makes considerable use of complementary colors, especially yellow and indigo. He also strategically places small dots of color so that the additive mixture would gain brilliance, a technique that we saw in Vermeer's painting and that we will see again with the Impressionists. Turner even imbued the Industrial Revolution with a harsh, austere beauty, as Monet would a generation later in one of our required works, which I've stuck on this slide as a teaser. In the Turner painting, we see the locomotive barreling toward us, pumping steam into the air. Like wild animals of other romantic paintings, it conveys power and dynamism as well as a kind of brute force. Any guess who painted the work on the bottom? Yep, it's another Valley of Mexico painting by Velasco, this one from 1879. Is the railroad an element of nature, or is it an invader? Maybe both. Note that Turner uses color much more radically, even though his painting is 35 years earlier. So, if you skipped the Khan Academy video on this work, go back and unskip it, please. Lots of test questions on this for this unit, likely to be lots in the AP exam as well. So, here is Simon Schama's account of this painting from the Power of Art series that I like so much. It's a long clip, sorry, but Schama does a great job of presenting the history behind this painting. You recall that your essay question for this unit is going to ask about depictions of an event in history, hint, hint. Schama does a great job of presenting the history, its composition and use of color, and its romantic elements. When the disembodied voice returns, we will be leaving Romanticism and exploring not only realist paintings, but the most radically realistic new art medium, photography.